The film begins with black and white documentary footage depicting the construction of a giant residential complex in one of Seoul's districts. The new apartments will allow many people to live in a comfortable and healthy environment, as the living conditions in these high-rise buildings are excellent. Everything was wonderful until a terrible natural disaster struck. Min-sun wakes up in his apartment, glances at his sleeping wife, and steps out onto the balcony, where he is greeted with a horrific view of Seoul. The city has been almost completely destroyed by a massive earthquake. Only one high-rise building in the Hwanggung residential complex, where the family's apartment is located, has survived. From above, he sees survivors gathering around the building, seeking shelter from the cold. Min-sun descends to the lobby, where the other residents have already gathered. There is no communication with the police, fire department, or any other services. People are also worried about the safety of staying in the building, though some argue it's better to die under the rubble than freeze outside. The senior residents try to calm their neighbors. Meanwhile, Min-sun finds some drinking water and returns to the apartment. His wife, Min-hwa, takes inventory of their food supplies and realizes they have enough for 2 weeks at most if no help arrives. Min-hwa suggests they leave the building and head to her father's house, but her husband believes it's too risky. He reassures her, trying to instill confidence that everything will be all right. In the middle of the night, a stranger knocks on their door. Her young son is freezing, and Min-sun is the only one who opened the door for them. She offers him expensive items in exchange for help. The couple lets the uninvited guests in, though they are uncertain if they made the right decision. The next morning, Min-sun discovers an improvised market in the lobby where people are bartering food, batteries, toilet paper, and other treasures for what they need. He trades an expensive watch for a can of canned fruit, but almost loses his prize. He miraculously retrieves the can, scaring away a swarm of giant cockroaches. Someone in the crowd suggests kicking out all outsiders, comparing them to these insects. There's talk that they are the reason for all the misfortunes of the apartment owners. Min-sun returns to his floor, noticing skirmishes between the residents and the outsiders. At home, Min-hwa and the boy they took in have managed to establish communication using 2 toy radios that work over a short distance. However, there's still no response from rescuers. Min-sun takes his wife to the next room and offers her a treat. She dislikes that they have to hide food from their guests, but her husband doesn't want to share any of the canned fruit he struggled so hard to obtain. But the guests accidentally notice the treats, so they have to share. Later, the couple goes outside to look around. Min-hwa, a nurse by training, rushes to help an injured man who was hurt by invaders when a fire breaks out in one of the apartments. The flames are extinguished only through the heroic efforts of one man. The building manager thanks him for saving the complex. Someone had seen the man earlier on the 9th floor, leading to the conclusion that he lives in apartment 902. Unhappy residents decide to hold a general meeting of apartment owners. A debate ensues about whether to evict the refugees. They had worked for years to buy these apartments, so why should they now share them with others? However, throwing people out into the cold would be a death sentence. People don't believe rescuers will arrive, as no helicopter has appeared during this whole time. Supplies are running out, and something must be done. The building manager points out that most of the guests came from the elite Palace of Dreams complex, where the wealthy recently looked down on their neighbors from Hwanggung. As a government official, Min-sun is asked if the authorities have a plan for such emergencies. He suggests they first elect a leader. Everyone agrees that the best candidate is the hero who was willing to sacrifice himself during the recent fire. The man is given the title of president. The group then holds a secret vote, and the decision is made to evict the tenants. The president promises to figure out the best way to do this. That evening, Min-hwa, who opposed forced eviction, asks her husband how he voted, but he suddenly remembers how, during the earthquake, he had tried to help a woman trapped under a car along with other passers-by. He survived only because he managed to jump into another car and buckle up before everything started collapsing. The next day, the president suggests that Min-sun lead a self-defense squad, as he is young and recently returned from the army. The meeting decides that only property owners should live in the building. To start, they need to gather all available weapons, though the president assures them that they don't intend to kill or maim anyone. The following day, all the outsiders are gathered in front of the main entrance under the pretext of being assigned vacant apartments. But as soon as they step outside, the president announces that they will all have to leave Hwanggung. A Seoul city councilor protests, but such positions no longer hold any authority. The disgruntled crowd tries to force its way back into the high-rise, and fights break out everywhere. Eventually, the president faces the crowd alone. He fearlessly walks forward, and after taking several blows, he forces the outsiders to retreat. At that moment, belongings begin to be thrown down from the upper floors, reinforcing the owner's victory. People thank the president and praise themselves. Life in the surviving building begins to normalize. Rules for residents are established. Everyone works for the common good. Min Sun forms a police squad to patrol the area. A supply committee manages the distribution of goods found in the area. Repairmen restore the emergency generators. A medical team and volunteers take care of the wounded and elderly. Most importantly, everyone learns how to handle waste. It seems like everything is returning to normal. Now, Min Sun's squad goes beyond the complex to search for food and survey the surrounding buildings, marking whether there are any survivors. Many buildings could be used for housing, but nearly all the people are dead, seemingly at the hands of others. However, supplies are dwindling, and finding anything under the rubble is becoming difficult. Min Sun grows closer to the president, who shares that his family died in the city. Meanwhile, that evening, Min Hua receives a radio call from the boy, who, along with his mother, has returned to their home. Meanwhile, Min Sun's squad finds what appears to be an untouched warehouse. But when the men try to break in, an armed man emerges. A fight ensues, and Min Sun beats the man to death. The squad takes the supplies, and as they leave, Min Sun sees the man's wife and child emerging from the ruins, mourning their loved one. The squad returns home, where the other residents are preparing for New Year's celebrations. At the tables, people praise Min Sun as a good police chief. Suddenly, a young woman named Hye-won arrives, claiming ownership of an apartment in the building. The building manager points to the president as her closest neighbor, but she behaves strangely around him. The president suggests welcoming her, and people ask him to sing for the rest. He sings and remembers the day before the earthquake when he arrived at the complex, only to lose his apartment due to a scam. The young man who bought the apartment tried to explain that he, too, was a victim of fraud, but the president was convinced that he was in cahoots with the realtor and attacked him. The men fought for a long time in front of the young man's semi-paralyzed mother, and eventually the president killed his opponent. Then he received a call from his wife, who blamed him for losing their home and wished for his death. Moments later, the sounds of destruction echoed outside, and now he sings for neighbors he never knew before the tragedy. The next day, Hye-won comes for food and witnesses an argument. People are unhappy with the unequal portions, but the building manager reminds them of the principle of each person's usefulness. That day, Min Sun's wife asks about the man he killed, but he insists his opponent survived. Nevertheless, she asks him not to go on any more raids, as she receives a large ration as a nurse. Later, she goes to the apartment where a man sheltered a woman and child and gives them some food. The president notices her visit. He later encounters Hye-won in the hallway, invites himself over, and brings a small heater. The girl acts cautiously, but agrees to remember her neighbor under pressure. Later, she visits Min Hua and shares that hell reigns everywhere. People survive however they can, while the residents of their building live in a closed-off world, refusing to help others. The neighbors pounce on her, and the girl's nerves snap. She confesses to Min Hua that the president is not her neighbor at all. At that moment, screams are heard from below. It turns out that one of the complex's residents ventured outside and was killed by vagabonds. The president orders the guards to be reinforced and heads to the apartment where Min Hua had brought food. The owner manages to hide the illegal tenants, but the president finds the woman and child. They are thrown out into the street. Min Sun blames his wife, and she confesses that the president is an imposter who never lived there. Her husband rushes to the president, begging for forgiveness, but the president asks only for hard work for the benefit of the building. The next day, thorough searches begin. Any outsiders found are thrown out, and the doors of the guilty are marked with red paint, denying them food. Later, the president gives a speech to the residents, promising to protect them. The guilty are forced to repeat a phrase 200 times, admitting that they were wrong. However, one man, in protest, jumps from a great height and dies in front of everyone. Later, his body is burned because the previously abandoned bodies have disappeared, presumably taken by vagabonds to be eaten. Meanwhile, water begins to flow into the courtyard, thanks to the workers who connected the supply. While people celebrate, Hye-won tells Min Sun that she saw the real neighbor and knows what he looks like. Meanwhile, food supplies run low again, and the president leads the squad in search of provisions. Soon they find a passage to the basement, and Min Sun descends there. At the same time, women sneak into the president's apartment through the balcony, where they find an old, sick woman. Min Hua tries to get her to confirm that the president is not her son, but she only asks for food. In the city, Min Sun finds a basement filled with corpses, but one of the walls seems suspicious to him, and after clearing it, he realizes it's the window display of a store. His wife finds a freezer containing the body of the real owner. The president's squad rejoices, gathering food, and praises Min Sun. He finds an ornament on the road and hides it in his pocket. Suddenly, stones begin to fall from the ruins above them. The president shoots at the attackers, while Min Sun carries out a wounded man. When they return home, hysteria erupts. There are too many injured, and the building manager's son is dead. The president urges the men to defend the building when Min-hwa steps forward, ready to befriend the outsiders to survive by helping each other. She accuses him of being an imposter and shows documents of the real owner and the body hidden in the freezer. The people are stunned by the deception. Arguments break out. The president tells the story of the scammer who took the apartment he bought, but this only fuels the crowd's anger. People start attacking each other and fights erupt everywhere. The president sees Hye-won, chases her, and throws her off the building. The crowd gasps and freezes, forgetting their disagreement. The president blames the girl for what happened, and Min-soon points a gun at him. But then screams are heard from outside, and the wall collapses under the pressure of outsiders who have come to take the building's food and apartments. A full-scale battle begins. Min-sun and his wife hide in an apartment on the first floor, while the crowd outside tears each other apart. The woman suggests they leave, but then a couple of outsiders break into the apartment, and Min-sun kills one of them but is wounded himself. The couple flees. Meanwhile, the outsiders throw a homemade bomb, but the president intercepts it and throws it back. As a result, it explodes in the midst of the fighting, injuring both sides. The couple leaves the complex, while the wounded president climbs to his apartment and dies, looking at a photo of his family. Min-sun and Min-hwa hide in the basement, where he gives his wife the ornament he found and dies. Morning comes, and the woman realizes her husband is gone. She cries over his body when she is found by some strange women who invite her to join them. Soon the group leads her to a house that has remained intact, though it has fallen on its side. They give her food, and Min-hwa is struck by the fact that no one demands anything in return. She smiles through her tears, saying that the residents of her complex were just ordinary people. The creators of the film didn't manage to tell the world anything fundamentally new that we didn't already know about people. However, one can observe how the cult of personality is born, where tyranny comes from, and where humanity disappears.